I think we have who may be here, so we'll start. And I'll start. Nathan, you're all set?
Oh, good.
Okay. I just would like to welcome everybody on this April Fool's Day, April 1, 2019. But this is a real meeting. This is the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union Policy Drafting Committee. And I really appreciate everybody's efforts to come out tonight to discuss majorly one topic. So what I'll do is go through my my agenda and make sure that we have things covered. And if we don't, we can make some adjustments to it now and then cover them during the presentation, during the meeting time. On my agenda, I had public comments, and we have minutes from our February 4th meeting to approve. We have, for our discussion tonight, is policy 6330, student eligibility and athletics co-curriculum activities for discussion. We have a tracking sheet, and then we had other things to consider in terms of future considerations to look at. And then we indicated May 6th as the next date that we'll probably have a meeting. If at this time, I'll just ask, is the format that I just went through, if it's okay, and if not, we'll make some adjustments to it. So hearing no objections to it, and the agenda schedule will be as indicated. First of all, I'd like to ask if there anyone here that would like to be speaking on behalf of the public in terms of a public comment. You don't have to be, say, a public person, but you can be a board person, you can be an administrator, you can do whatever, but you can speak in behalf of a public comment. Are there any? Seeing none, I'll like to move on to the next. We have minutes from February 4th, policy committee meetings that we had. I'd like to have a motion to accept those. It's been moved and second that we accept the minutes from February 4th. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at them, and if there's anything that may be out of line there, you can speak now and we can make a correction to it. If not, I'll ask that we all agree to accept the minutes as written for February 4th, 2019. All in favor? Aye. Okay, good. The third item is the heart of the meeting tonight, and that's the student eligibility for athletes and co-curricular activities. And this one just a preamble to how we want to go after this thing. This is a policy committee, and we want to hear all concerns, all views, and ask that you think outside the box if necessary, remove your paradigms or tunnel vision so that we can hear the concerns that we have in terms of this policy. This policy affects a great number of the kids that in our community at the high school. I would probably throw a number out of more than 60% affected by this policy alone at the high school and the middle school. So we have to be careful in terms of what it is that we're offering our youth. One of the things that I wanted to say in light of this is an ample opportunity. We have new people in the areas of administrations in the high school and in terms of the directors for athletics. And we want to take this time to go after that. We have new educational curriculum activities going on in terms of how we need to look at students in terms of proficiency-based learning and so forth. That's all coming together. With all of the new technology and the changes in the world around, we're faced with shrinking number of students in our high schools and middle schools alike or within the district. And so it calls for us to take another look at what it is that we have here in town. We're losing industries, we're losing college and other things along this line, and the students that we got are the students that we have. And so we want to this is an opportunity for us to take a look at this particular policy that affects so many and make sure that we do what is necessary to make sure that this community, the school, shines when it comes to those students. With that said, I would we have some administrators in. What I like to do is, for the public, since we being taped, I'll have an introduction to let everybody know who's here. And if you don't mind, we'll start with Lisa.
Lisa Poplaski, Administrative Assistant to Laura Boudreau.
Laura Boudreau, Assistant Superintendent.
Dave Barrow, Dean of Students at the high school.
Sandy Foster, Principal Woodford.
Angie Rowling, Penwell.
Maria Skelly, North Bennington.
Chris Murphy, BSD.
Tony D'Onofrio, Shaftesbury.
And Leon Johnson, I'm from North Bennington, representing SVSU here tonight. We have some more on the second line. Thank you.
Ashley Hoyt, Athletic Director and Activities Director.
Dave Frederickson, Mount Anthony School Board, former coach and athletic director.
Steve Nixon, Principal of the high school.
Chris McGuire, Associate Principal, Middle School.
Tim Payne, Middle School Principal.
Okay, thank you. I think we have someone else that was knocking at the door there. Well, just high winds. It's an April Fool.
Oh, the wind will rattle the door.
Okay.
Wow.
In the minutes, for last meeting, I spoke about the separation of things that happened in the policy, and for some reason, I never saw the last year, the handbook that went out that actually had some separation in terms of the high school and the middle school, and I didn't realize that. And so what was being acted on was being acted on from what was acted in print previous years. And I made the comment that we only had one policy. We had a student eligibility policy for Mount Anthony, and Mount Anthony included the middle school, and so we had one policy. But when it came to some administrative adjustments, there were some changes out there, and I saw, and there was some action taken on those changes to go into the proficiency-based learning process, and I was a little bit confused. So I know where they came from now. But what I wanted to start out and take input, I'd like to hear from our guests, our non-regular members first out here. And so at the end, what I'd like to know from everybody, do we want to have one policy? Do we need to have that policy split between a high school and a middle school? Do we want to have a policy that address seniors, varsity level players, and do something less involvement with all the rest of them? Do we want to have some adding in here, and some of the part of the things that I did is scoured the websites throughout the country, and there were some schools that offered recognition, and we don't want to go all of that far, but I'm throwing these things out here as an opener for you, that they offered recognitions on the student's report card that they had participated in a particular sport, up to between 5 and 15 credits some of them gave. And some of them didn't do anything out here. There were some of the policies out here that just addressed 9 through 12. And so I wanted everybody to understand that this is an opportunity we make the changes. If we don't get it right this time, when we put some in place, we can come back and make some changes and get it right the next time. So with that, I'd like to hear from guests first concerning their views of what is being contemplated in terms of how you see this particular policy. Is that appropriate? Okay. Who would like to be first?
Actually, I'll start with middle school.
Okay.
So when I was here at the last meeting, and I spoke a little bit about, the policy as it currently is, as you said, Leanne, with the changes, that were implemented this year, because it looks different this year than it has years past at the middle school. And then we also proposed a couple tweaks, to the policy moving forward, which Lisa's done a great job kind of drafting up just so we can see what that might look like. So basically for everyone, I'll give a quick synopsis of what we were looking at this year for our policy. We focused on the Just B scores. Actually, jump in at any point here. I don't want to, step over, but we focused on the Just B scores. So their habits of work, not academic grades, their behavior-related grades. There's 3 categories: respect, best effort, and responsibility. And so a student has to meet the standard or exceed the standard, so get a score 3 or a 4 in all of those habits of work domain in each class to be eligible. That's how it currently is now. If they do not receive that, they're ineligible for a 2-week period. And currently in the policy as it's written for this school year, there's no way of avoiding that being ineligible for that 2 weeks. Once they're found ineligible, 2-week period, they're ineligible.
Right. That's correct.
The proposed changes moving into next year that we've talked about at the last meeting, and I think that we're all on the same page. It's still where we're at. Our proposal is at. Same criteria to hold a kid to distinguish if a kid is a student is ineligible or not. The 3 habits of work grades. But the change would be that if a student, over the course of the first week, during that 2-week period of ineligibility, the student would have an opportunity to try to earn back eligibility for the second week. So there's a form that we've drafted up, again, just very, kind of rough draft format, but we have drafted up a form. Actually, a teacher passed something along to Ashley and I that could possibly be used. And then, it would be in the students' hands to go around to their teachers. There's a little reflection component about why they're ineligible, why after this week they feel that they should be eligible, and then there's a sign off, from Ashley, coach, and teacher for it to happen. The only other piece I'd add into that is a proposed change is any student that receives Saturday detention, out of school suspension, or in school suspension would be ineligible for the 2-week period as well. And that would be indefinitely without, for those 3 scenarios, a Saturday detention, ISS or OSS, that would be, there would be no earning back for the 2-week period. They'd be ineligible for a 2-week period. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And these things all affect, when you look at it, everybody think it's either basketball or football or baseball, but this is clubs activities as well. Mm-hmm. And so,
As a parent, I don't understand why you would give a consequence and then not follow through.
well, we'll be, Angie,
I'm
yes,
sorry.
I'm saying, no, it's a good point, and I'm saying what we wanted to do is make sure we talk about that. I think I throwed out the fact that do we want to be, I used a word, and I wasn't talking about Tim Payne last time. I said it went administrative pain associated with the changes in the policy. Why do we want to create that when we don't have to? So I'm a very simple man. I'm saying we can make things simple and not have you have to be suffering with the implementation of things when it's not necessary.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, go ahead.
So when you say they're suspended for a 2-week period, and that first week they have an opportunity to earn it back. Now, we're not giving 60s, 70s, 80s, 90% anymore. So what does that look like?
It looks
How would someone who got a grade that made them ineligible for 2 weeks, in that week, how do they earn that back? Can you just kind of...
Absolutely. No, it's a great question. They would have to demonstrate whatever domain, respect, responsibility, or best effort, they would have to demonstrate that they were being respectful,
In
that they
whatever-
were being responsible.
whatever
And
it
at the
was.
middle school, it is a really good question actually. At the middle school, teachers actually keep documentation of evidence of if a student is, how a student is showing respect, responsibility, best effort. We have a little, checklist systems and things like that where, for example, if a student comes in to demonstrate best effort, they have to be prepared for class. So they'll do a quick scan, of their classroom, be like, yep, so-and-so's, and they'll make note of that through checklists and things. So essentially, like, it won't just be like, oh yeah, you've been responsible. It's, this will be documented, the teacher will have to keep evidence of that to show, yes, you've been responsible because on these days this happened, or no, you haven't showed responsibility in that week period.
But I think what you're asking too, that's not tied into grades though.
That's correct. It's
Right.
not.
That's what I wanted.
No, I know that, yeah, no, I know, that's why I'm like, it's one thing if you take a test and you get 100 on it,
Right.
okay, I'm eligible now,
Right.
that's not like that anymore, so,
So
what does that look like?
That's right, and it's two things out here we
Yeah.
talk about, grades and respect. We need, and I have to say, I'm one of the ones that, we need to have some consequences for those things that happen when it comes to respect
And the whole-
versus
the
the
whole
grade.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The whole premise of why we, asked for this policy to change, last year with standards-based grading is if a student is coming in and working their tail off and trying really hard, that's ultimately what we
Right,
want.
right.
And we don't want to, hold them back from a good opportunity to play a sport if they're just not doing great in math, but they're working really hard on getting there.
So what are we telling the
Okay.
students that have straight A's and work their butts off so they can do sports?
I would just
I
tell them
didn't
to be a good
understand that.
citizen.
I'll try to understand the question so that everybody, I didn't understand the comment.
So what do we tell the students that work their butts off and work really, really hard to have straight A's and to be on a team and to do well, that they do every day?
Well, it may be
How
the
is that
case.
fair to let a student that isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing or have good grades participate into a sport?
Right, and
What are you
I'll,
telling those students?
I'm telling those students that every student that we have, and I think in the preamble to say, I hear that everybody's not equal.
No, and
There are
when you get out in
people
the real world,
that-
not everybody is equal. And in school, we're telling them that they're all equal. And that's why these young students and children can't interact or even look at people in the face out in the community.
Well, that's why we're talking about two different, one in grades and one in discipline. And I'll let Tim has something he wants.
So, and I hear your concern, but what's the motivation? So, but I would go back to my experience in high school, and I worked at Mount Anthony, but I also worked in another high school locally, and under the old grading system, purely a number. And in the school, the most recent school that I worked at, we had a 2-week period similar, and what you saw was grades would go out, and then there was this hustle in the building. Everybody ran around, passing homework and make up the quiz and get back on that playing list. And what we found is that you had students who they knew how to hit that number, but they might not necessarily be the citizen you want to be in the building. And that was in the conversation we had last year. What are we really looking for? Increasingly, the schools are asked to offer more opportunities for students. Folks have seen that. More and more sports are now offered through the middle school than they are through the community. Little League baseball, basketball, all those sports have been coming under the roof. And if we are, I think it's okay for schools to say, if you're going to wear a uniform or perform in a play or participate in student senate, you should be a good citizen. I appreciate the fact that you're an A student, but you should be respectful and responsible and giving your best effort to your fellow students and because ultimately that's what we'd like to see them when they're in the community and not having a meltdown in Walmart as I'm shopping for groceries, that kind of thing. So I think that's, as a middle school, we had that conversation knowing that we were going to be in this proficiency. We could have chosen academics or we could have chosen, the 3 Bs, and we landed on the 3 Bs thinking that this is something we feel that a vast majority of kids can attain, and we want to encourage them to do that so that they can participate in all the things that school offers.
Okay, Sandy.
Since you officiate at baseball games, and I know you have seen at least 1 or 2 helmets thrown and bats in your time as an umpire. What happens under that respect category when you see that happening?
Oh, I'll take care of it.
Under Mr. Crane's process, that is not being respectful. So where does the law, or hockey, you know, there's a little bit of.
So what we're talking about, I just wanted to clarify two things. There's no question, we have to demand that we get respect within in the system that we operate in. When I meant that everybody is not equal when it comes to their ability, when it comes to the abstract knowledge ability in terms to be able to challenge themselves in the learning environment. And the same thing comes with working with the hands and vice versa. It's just not the same. They're not all equal. And so at an earlier age, we hate to penalize them to the point where they drop off, as opposed to being at a senior level, at a varsity level. And that's why I throw that out there and said, well, should we be thinking different at the end when we get out? And here we'll be talking about, what do we want to talk about? Varsity level, JV, or not? And what are those consequences should be along that line for respect, discipline versus grades. So this healthy conversation is what we need, and then we'll come back and I'll be trying to get answers to those questions, and that's how we'll formulate the policy, and then the administration regs will go behind that.
I would just add, that I think it's been said by this group a number of times. We all know that kids who participate in activities outside the classroom and school do better in school.
Right.
Play sports, be a member of the Senate, be in the theater. Previous AD would come every year and tell you what their GPAs are and their attendance and their lack of discipline issues. All of that's positive. And so I also think we've been thoughtful about, you don't want to discourage kids like, I can't get the grade to stay on the baseball team. So I think that's one of those things that, Chris has mentioned. We've come back, all right, we've learned from a year. Do we give kids a path back? You don't want to just shut the door and say you're out. Kids, I would just remind everybody though that for that 2-week period, kids still are expected to go to practice. You need to go to practice. You're still a member of the team. You just can't suit up for games. So that, again, that's a balance. You're trying to encourage young people to keep working hard, and you don't want to slam the door on them that says, you screwed up, you're out, and they're not in.
And that's actually going to show good integrity with that student if they're willing to do that.
Yeah.
And know they're not going to play, but they're willing to go to practice. That's an integrity thing right there too. I'm 100%. I played sports.
I'll be back to that later.
I played sports in that, and I was in the era of you didn't make the grades, you didn't play. Bottom line, right? And I like that, but I also like with the proficiency learning, the ability to come back and being able to show the ability. Because you're right, not everybody's going to get. I wasn't an A student. I just wasn't. But to give them a path like you're talking about, and truly demonstrating their effort, and truly demonstrating their responsibility, and demonstrating all those things, and giving them an ability to get back in. I love that. I think it's great. I think it's better than I studied real hard, I got a grade, now I don't really care. I got my grade, I'm playing now, so I don't really care about the grade. And they slip back in. You're not going to do that in that format that you're talking about right now.
So now we're in the 3 categories that we're going to talk about. One is one that has a respect, a disciplinary action. One has grades, and the consequences that we're starting to move into. And so we'll be talking about those out here. We can, and I'll ask specifically about each one of those, but I just wanted to make sure I got everything out on the table from everybody before we try to move it. Dave has some comments.
The reason I came, Leon, I was, I heard you were talking eligibility, and I was afraid we were lowering the standards. And I think I've told you, I thought when I was there, if a kid made an effort, went to class, wasn't a pain in the ass, and did his homework, he was going to be eligible. And some of that is what you're saying right now. If they're making an effort and they're behaving, it kind of goes hand in hand.
Right, that's what's been addressed earlier. Let me throw this out. When I mentioned something about the student, kids are not what they used to be. They cry when they get a bad recommendation or comment on a cell phone. They cry. And they not want to attend school and do other things. Who would have thought that we would have that to be faced with us today along that line? So when it comes around to discipline, it used to be that, yep, I messed up. I'm sitting on the sideline. I'm going to practice and I'm out there with the team and I'll wait my time out. They don't want to do that now. You tell me that I messed up and I can go practice, but I'm going to have to not suit up and go sit out there with the team. I'll quit. And this is what's happening as well. So I want to make sure you realize we're not dealing with the same type of a kid that we had 30, 40 years ago along that line. We're dealing with a different type of student that we may need to take heed to how we manage them when it comes to punitive repercussions in terms of what they need to happen. Some schools, when I was reading through some of them, they said, well, look, that 2 weeks period, you didn't get it right, and you have another week, 2 week period, you were done for the year. And I'm saying, whoa, but those are some things. I just want to throw out some of the things out here to let you know that there's all kind of things that can happen along that line. Are we offering too much when we don't have enough numbers that we have to worry about the students that are participating when we say that? These days we've become more informed about the physical conditions of the players themselves when it comes to the rough things versus the checkers and the backgammon and so forth along that line. And so parents are much more cognizant of their kids participating along that line, and so the numbers just keep shrinking. And so I wanted us to be aware of those kind of things happening out there. So we'll keep on, and let's hear from somebody else in terms of that. I'll put eligibility down here, Dave. Anybody?
Just add in one small comment to Mr. Frederickson's remarks. The things you're talking about, like getting to class on time, getting your homework done, those are clearly outlined within those 3 Just Be categories. Those are specific things that teachers are accumulating evidence on and scoring students on. So I agree with you. I mean, those things that you're have been telling players in the old system. That's what we're asking students to do with the 3 Just Be scores.
Right, and that's, I think we're in agreement when we split up the categories. What do you think, in terms of what it is that we want for the students? If you have any other comments, Ashley?
Could I ask Ashley a question?
Well, you can ask it and I'll send it back that way. You don't have to send it directly to her, because you can ask the question to all of us.
Okay. It appears to me more males are ineligible than females. Is that true?
I'll probably have to agree with that, yeah.
Okay. But let me tell you, and this really, I'm going to look straight at the camera here. It broke my heart for the first time, and I mentioned that to Tim, that I had a group of female players that had all failed the class, and they were ineligible to play at the middle school. And it didn't, the comments from them, really hurt when they tried to explain to me, like, it was like, okay, this is the way it is. I can expect not to be able to move on at the next level. And that really hurt me, and that got me going 2 or 3 years ago when I ran into that, because I had not ran into that situation. And so we do have a lot along that line, but we do have a rising population of individuals that used to not be included in that in terms of failure when it was, mostly males.
I hate those generalizations, so I have to ask you, how many football players do you have that are male?
We didn't have a single girl that played this
How
year.
many football players do you have, Ben?
43.
43.
So,
And how many wrestlers do you have that are male?
Every single one of them. So
Yeah.
right around, probably right around 25.
Okay, so in theory, since there are more options for men, wouldn't, or boys, wouldn't it make, just in thought, that there would be more aggression for the males than the females, because just in the numbers alone, you have more
Yeah.
participants.
Right.
right, and that's why I wanted to say, I'm saying that things are happening out here. I don't want to go at it that way. We're gonna fix something, but I just wanted you to know that things like that exist out there, and we want to be cognizant of what it is and how it affects the young ones growing up. And what I was getting at, back at that level, they were already deterred from moving forward in their eyes to the next level to get to the high school. And when they got to the high school, I looked for them to see what they were doing.
But Leon, that would have happened to me in my basketball playing in junior high school.
Right.
But as I moved to the high school, I obviously didn't have the skills necessary to be a high school basketball player. You just knew it.
Right.
So you just went to, and you did other things. And the high school has so many different opportunities for students that I don't always feel as though they need to go to a sport.
Oh,
it's
yes,
nice that they
right.
have the other options as well.
I agree. I'm just saying that the consequences that took place back there was one that was a punitive in their eyes, and it affected them. And I'm saying, think about what it is that we want them to do. Dress up, go practice, dress up, and then be out there in front of everybody, or don't show up, period. I want to open the door and says, think about your audience that you have, and then what changes you may want to make to that. You may not want to make any, but I didn't want us to leave here and not think outside the norms and how we want to manage or try something. That's all. Dave.
The thing about at the high school, we're in a different system, so we'd have to have different regs because we don't have the same grading system this in place. So, so we do go by academics, and I think it's not unfair to say, we're not talking about kids who are crying because they're not getting A's. 65 is the cutoff, so we're expecting to pass. I do think we could be flexible and think about things like effort and attendance, which currently we're not dealing with, right? But
Yeah.
those would be, and maybe even the extenuating circumstance category, be flexible. But I don't know what else we could do that would be, given our structure at this point. So I think those are areas that maybe we could look into.
Okay.
Yeah, because right now, moving forward in talks with Steve and other admin at the high school, the eligibility right now is slated not to change much for next year because we're planning to go by the number grades as well, with still having that 1 week probationary period for anyone who is has a grade below a 65 at the halfway point of any quarter or at the end of any quarter and semester. So like I said, like Dave said, we're on kind of a totally different grading scale than the middle school. So in terms of the high school athletic eligibility, it's not looking to change a whole lot because of just the difference in where we're at there and where the middle school's at with proficiency.
So we don't have the 3 Bs.
We don't have the 3 Bs right now, and that's why it'd be extremely hard to judge on those 3 categories in all of our classes when we don't utilize that at the high school.
So what does it look like for a student in the 2-week probation in the high school?
So what it looks like is, say we're in the first quarter, it's just after the halfway mark. I'll get the grades, anyone with basically a 64 or below. They have 1 week. At the end of the 1 week, they're going to go to all their teachers. They have to have a 65 in all their classes in order, which is passing. And then they, like I said, it's the same as the middle school. They get to practice, they get to travel as long as the bus doesn't leave before the end of the school day. They dress in, nice attire on the bench, but they can't be in uniform. And then after that 1 week period, if they're passing everything, they go right back to playing games. If not, it continues until those grades are met. So they bring the pink sheet to all their classes on that Friday, and like I said, it's checked in every Friday. It's typically a Friday.
How long do we follow a student after that?
So then the next check-in is at the end of the quarter, then halfway, then quarter, unless, as soon as they become eligible again, they're not checked upon until that next either quarter end or halfway. So the middle school does 2 weeks period. When I was at Arlington as well, we did the 2 week period for grades. But here it's only every, halfway through, end of the quarter. So they're not checked on as much. But the individuals who are failing, not passing any amount of classes, they're kept an eye on until they're passing again.
Okay. One of the challenges here is to ask and look into what it is that you would like to have the board considered in terms of a recommendation of a grade point minimum along that line. That's one of the things that we want to look at in terms of whether it's a C, a B, it's a 65. And we changed it. It was a 70, and we went to 65 and so forth. But I just want to say it's not written in stones that that's what it's going to be. Could wind up being. That's why we want to hear along that line. I want to get the input in terms of how much pain this is causing you, or causing the students. I'm trying to throw that out there and say, look, this is the way it is now, and look at the situations. I just have to say that we're losing students in terms of numbers. We're losing them. They're losing teams, and we're losing efforts, and how will this affect you? So I'm trying to throw all this out here and say what changes we can make to help change these things so that we can be looked at. We can have increased numbers, better participation at certain things, and not allow an individual that may be good with their hands and may not be as astute to get to drop off in the process by rigorous criteria that we may have in place. And that's all I'm asking for us to talk about here. Is it Sandy?
Well, I think David was before me anyway.
Okay,
I
Dave.
was just going to say, at the high school, we have so many labs and ways to help kids, and I think that when we lowered it to passing, that was good. I mean, you have to really try to fail, because there are so many places you can get help. I mean, we have all kinds of classes built in. So it's very rare for a kid to bottom out and try. If that's the case, they're not placed correctly. And we try to really make sure that we address that. So I don't think it's unfair to say, you got to pass your courses to play a sport. I mean, I think that goes back to what Angie said,
Well, you had my son in your every day.
I have fond memories.
Until he started playing football, and then he straightened himself out, and that's because
That's what I was going to say too. is
he
that
had to go by and follow rules and regulations.
we actually see,
Right.
the opposite effect, that kids rise to the occasion, and sometimes they play a fall sport, like your son did, and then they get into the habit and they continue to do well the rest of the year. So that we actually look forward to certain kids playing sports because we know
Right,
it's gonna-
and that's why I
Major
just,
turnaround for him.
and that's why-
Major turnaround.
and that's why I wanted to make sure that we were excluding selectively with the criteria we have in place, that we may be excluding some. And I go back to some of Dave's old players and so forth along this line, and I see them when they're born at the hospital, I see them in the community, I see them at the school, and I see them everywhere else that they go here. And I got their grandkids playing, and I'm doing their stuff, and they talk about what they did, but they didn't get, I didn't make it this far because I got cut. But I want my kid to go out here and do something and so forth along that line. So I'm just throwing all these things out there. Sandy.
It almost implies with your, no disrespect to the work that you've done, but it almost implies with the middle school thought process that they aren't being graded, and yet they are. They still have to meet a standard academically, which is.
Well, that hadn't changed yet. That's coming up, and you're going that way. Right now, you still had a grade requirement.
It's a 4-point scale. They're scored on a 1, 2, 3, or 4, 3 being meeting the standard currently. For
Okay.
academics as well in the middle school.
Okay.
But eligibility is only based off the
Habits.
habits, the 3Bs, if you will.
Oh,
Right.
I think I mentioned last time, and what I opened with here, we only have one policy. And somehow, something got split. And if I go back and look at it, 63, 30, in order to have a policy in place, have a procedure in place, the policy should address those items. And what we're gonna do is wind up fixing it so we can address those items. But we wanna make sure that we have an agreement to split high school and middle school out in terms of the policy, which we do, right there on
Wouldn't that be in the
line 1.
regs? Wouldn't that be in the regs and not?
Well, we'll regs, as long as we agree, if the regs would be the details, but I wanted to make sure, high school, middle school, so we can start to answer those questions and say, okay, we're gonna have a different scenario for high school students versus for the middle school. So if I get everybody to agree to that, then we can move on and says, okay,
So you're suggesting splitting them and having 2 different policies?
2 different sections in the policy that really address,
Which is what, I
I
don't
think
know.
we
if
have
it's
it.
we
written.
have the
That's what we have.
eligibility right there.
I think we're all in
This is high
agreement.
school.
Yeah.
But the grades stayed the same, you wanted to,
Say,
Well, the middle and high school administration.
Can I just ask a
you
question?
wanted to change the grading for the middle school versus what was gonna be treated in the high school when the language is the same. And that's why I was wanting to say, in order to actually do that, for the high school to come out and says, I wanna do something different, then we need to say, we wanna make sure that we have it broke out, the grading system in here, that was different consequences for the high school versus the middle school.
I guess my concern is that it's implying as though we don't have grades in the middle school, and I just didn't want that thought process to
Oh,
be
no,
out
no.
there.
It's not been that the case. I mean, my scenario that I mentioned out here, that was a grade, it wasn't a discipline thing. So the middle school students were being looked at with their grades as well as discipline.
They still have to maintain their grades along with
Well,
that
My
in order to
concern
play,
is,
right?
going back to my son, I have a daughter and a son, my daughter was excellent, my son not so much. But you have to have consistency, and it's really hard for a student that has all these teachers and they're not consistent. One teacher would let him chew gum, one would let him listen to music when his work was done, one would let him wear a hat. And I think you're gonna have the same problem with the middle school children going to the high school, and they're not gonna be able to meet the eligibility because it's different than what it is at the high school.
Well, that's
And
what
so
we're,
when they get to the high school, they're gonna say, well, this ain't fair, this isn't how it was back in the 7th and 8th grade, and that's how the students are nowadays. They have to have a reason why, they have to have a reason for everything. You can't tell a child no, and you guys know it.
so, and that's why I comment on the fact, should we be talking about varsity level? It's not just
I think we should
high
have
school.
one policy, cause I'm sorry, I think it should be fair from 8th grade up to 12th grade.
7th grade.
Or 7th grade, I'm sorry, up to 12th grade.
And so that's the question here that I wanted to make sure, and then the repercussions along that.
Because
Now,
they're
I
not
wanted to
gonna
make
understand
sure,
when they get in high school, how come they can't play,
uh,
because it's not like it was in middle school.
well, if we were to say that the stricter criteria is required to the varsity level or whatever, then you may have a difference. They have time to grow
Yeah.
under the system as opposed to something
Yeah.
else. Laura?
Yeah, so the good news is that all of our kids have to show evidence towards meeting the transferable skills. That's a Vermont requirement. So that is what I know across the district their expectations are based on, and the high school as well has their expectations posted in the hallway, and that's where the habits of work come from. So we are they are like the top of what we look for in our kids. And I think a lot of what it's helped us to do is, and it goes back to what you said, we want our kids to be responsible and be able to have the skill set they can have to be successful. And so I think starting in kindergarten, we are measuring the transferable skills through the lens of work habits all the way up through. So it's a system that's becoming more familiar all the way starting in kindergarten, and is now reported out. And so I think in continuing to dive a little bit deeper, what you guys have done is goes back to the initial part of this conversation, is we want to make sure that our kids are working really hard and that we're acknowledging that. And when they're not, we want to support them in getting there, but not penalize them if there's something that we also need to then find some support in the lens. We want to make sure all kids have access to these opportunities. How we're measuring them is what the middle school has, at all of our schools, have started to analyze. And right now, I know what I'm hearing as I'm listening to this whole conversation is we're really landing on back to the work habits or the transferable skills. Like, that's what we want kids to walk out of our school for sure having down pat.
Right, and so.
And they are measured.
One of the
They are
things
measured.
that we put in place that we really push the fact is that when I keep saying all of the kids, and that you hit it right on the head, the student support that they need to get. And they start, we've now pushed that and said, you know, if you're having a problem anywhere, in any form or fashion, you gotta say something and we're gonna get help some kind of way. Now, you gotta be able to work, and then, you know, we're saying even if you don't say anything, those that are in position to see that there's somebody struggling and not saying something, to recommend that they get some additional help or some form of fashion. So that's happening. I don't know that we really speak to that in here in terms of anything that we need to do administrative wise. We said that they need to go out and look at, review and get the grades up, but we needed to, somewhere in the policy we could say that, hey, look, there would be additional help provided if you need it or required. Did I miss that anywhere out here along that line? And I'm saying we can speak to that in terms of a policy versus a procedure so that the parents, everybody would know that, yep, these are the requirements. There's respect, there's grades, and there's consequences, and there's help. So that's 4 things now that we're talking about that somehow we got to make sure we engrade those into the policy so that we can do what we need to have in terms of covering everything. Sam?
So I'm back to the AD and in the respect category, if you do have a kid throw a helmet or a baseball bat or softball, who has to determine where that respect level is?
So one of the proposals, so that would be an athletic. In the case of a kid tossing a helmet at a game, that's an athletic piece.
Yep.
But one of the proposal that Chris put out there was something that we observed this year. So you can be a respectful young person in the classrooms all day long, but maybe in the lunchroom or maybe in the hallway, you're not. You like to poke at other kids, you like to tell teachers to jump in a lake. And so that was one way we're like, well, you know what? We want to see it the whole school day. As far as a kid participating on a baseball
or lacrosse,
absolutely throws a fit at a basketball game. There are rules within athletics that would address that as well, which would immediately impact ability to participate in practice and playing games. That's never been, even in the older system, that's never been a school first. That's an athletic department first.
When you say, I just wanted to say athletic, when you asked that question and I said I'll take care of it, any of the recognized sports at the varsity level, at least all the certified officials are required to uphold the rules and regulations of those particular sports. And behavior, taunting, bullying, all those things out there is for the coach and the official to take care of right on the spot. Now, if the school take on some additional things, that's just fine. So I'm just saying that there's some place to take care of all of those things.
But this, putting it into the policy makes it a little bit subjective as to, you know, you just struck out and you ended the inning and kids were, bases were loaded, who knows what the scenario is. Who's making that determination that it was, you threw the helmet too hard, you threw the bat too hard? Where does that, how does that happen?
So I guess to answer that,
Be a coach.
it would be a coach. It is a coaching.
It's
It
a
is a coach.
So if you're a coach, and I don't mean to be
No, it's fine. No,
disrespectful
it's fine.
to any of your coaches, I'm
No,
sure
no, you're fine.
they walk the line and they have the highest integrity. But if the championship game is on the line and, you know, somebody,
But-
whatever sport it is,
But I have to just go back and say it. You have a coach that's responsible for the kids in the dugouts or wherever they are, and they're responsible for those things. And once you cross the line in terms of that particular sport and you use throwing a helmet, if somebody throw the helmet and hit the wall and I'm going to take care of it as an official.
And as a coach,
And so-
coaches, yeah.
but you've seen, I mean, we've seen
Yeah,
it.
oh yeah, I've seen it. And so, and we take care of parents, we take care of everything. I mean, I just happened to tell you just yesterday, I put a stop to a coach and some players at Mill River yesterday, Saturday, when I was doing basketball. Just didn't tolerate it. That was under my jurisdiction to control. And we have to make sure officials do that.
So your officials you hold your officials accountable, so you follow up with them, or do they follow
But
up with
the
you?
officials follow up with me directly. The assigners will. So Leon's doing softball and his assigner contacts me. Leon reported this to your game. I follow up the coach. This past basketball season we had some technicals. The officials contact the assigner contacts me, I deal with it with the coach. The coach hands us down suspension, and we suspended kids half games, full games for behavior issues this year. So we obviously deal with it in the athletic department, but doesn't go into our eligibility.
Right. So
Put it with yours.
I don't want to drift too much because what I want to do, and we've been
Well,
talking for almost
I'll answer that in a minute, sorry.
we've been talking for almost an hour, and I want to get the format of this thing down so I can get the consensus as to where we need to be moving here along that line. And so I mentioned earlier, and I'll go back to those things, and we can ask the question right now, and I need to know in that line up there, one, it says currently in the policy that the eligibility for participation at middle school and
Nope.
high school, didn't break it up. Okay, and then the criteria is down below that. And that's what I wanted to say. Do you want to break this? And I need to get a consensus as to which way you want us to go with that, because that line will be, that means we'll have one for the high school and one for the middle school, and then we can start to talk about some of these other things. So I'm gonna start to break this up so that we can move ahead and have some progress in here. And I'll ask you, what do you think in terms of opinions? And again, to remind you that all the things that we do here has to be approved by all of the districts in SVSU. And that's from the elementary, middle school, and high school. Okay.
Lisa has a comment that's important.
Okay, Lisa.
Thank you, Tim. This is the worked up policy based on things that Chris McGuire gave me. This says everything that's been discussed. So this is a jump off point of what, changing the policy might look like. And it is separated. You have, this is middle school at the beginning, and then the next segment is high school.
So I know, thanks Chris, what I want to know from everybody, and I appreciate the effort, if I'm going to take this to SVSU, and every district in here, every member in here of the board has a responsibility to go back and be able to explain to their districts that they agree with the fact that they want, and that they agree with splitting that up. And that's what I'm looking for in here. And so if I can get that, then we can move on to the next next phase. So Sandy,
So I wanted it, for all of you who've been on this committee for a while, I want you to think back to the attendance policy. Because in the attendance policy, we have one attendance policy, and then we break it out from what level of education you're in. And so my thought is that this eligibility sounds more like administrative regs and not like the policy itself. So what I'm proposing is that we make a policy, and then in the administrative regs, add either the high school or the middle school recommendations.
we have to speak to the fact that in the policy that there is, there would have to be some wording
Yes.
in terms of knowing that there are adolescents involved and that we, as to the reason why things may be different than at the high school level. But
is
we,
what we
it's,
did
we can do it
in-
easy. I know, it can easily be done by just agreeing here the fact that, one, eligibility for participation at the middle school, eligibility for participation at the high school. And knowing that high school students should be held, I mean, if we ask the question at whether it should be varsity level, whatever the criteria are knowing that we're going to nurture the middle school students more. I think currently in your student handbook, you talk about the fact that the emphasis should be on training and learning at that level and not so much winning as opposed to at the varsity level. She speaks to that now. So what I'm trying to just do is make sure we get the language in here to cover that. So if I can just get an agreement, and I think we are, one, that we want to have in the policy, because that policy needs to say that. Maria, you, okay.
I'm okay, I'm okay with it. I just don't, I understand what you're saying though about making sure that it's a universal. You're not going from one standard to another when you change from middle school to high school. And just because you're going from two different grading policies, I understand there has to be a difference, but I agree that there should be some continuity. So just so long as we are aware of that, I'm okay with
Okay, it's Sandy, Dave.
it.
Okay, so at least one thing we've got. We're agreeing that we would have the language in the policy speaks to the high school and in one section, and the middle school in another section. And then the consequences that are in there, I hadn't gone into all of those out here in terms of, let me see my cheat sheet here, in terms of the things that we want to do on those things. Now, if you want to speak to those students, one of the things you said, we spoke about grading in here, and right now we have the 65 and we got the 70 criteria in it. That will be synchronized with the proficiency grading level of what that means in terms of where you are as opposed to a grade along that line. And I don't know exactly what that means, whether in terms of the different levels that exist right now. That if we keep in a grade minimum in here of 65 or 70, and when we said we don't have grades, what's that that's gonna be a what?
Are we talking about just middle school right now?
Well, I just wanted to make it, and then we'll split it off, but I wanted to say, what does it look like?
I think it has to be different already, because they don't have 65, 70%, 80% in middle school. It's proficiency-based learning, so they're getting away from that. So I think we gotta start right away breaking it different.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, but I just wanted to make sure that minimum level is not one that's just based on the fact that, and whether it's gonna be, what does that, your minimum standard, and I didn't read that, the help is while we look at it. The minimum standard corresponds to what proficiency-based standard?
Can I respond, try to respond to that?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the popular answer, but it doesn't equate. So there's no proficiency score that can be connected to any certain score in a percentage world. And the reason is because, you know, you're in a proficiency world, you know, you're really judging students not based on how they do against everybody else, you know, or in that 100-point system. It's really like, here's the learning standard, can you do it? And if you can do it, you have a 3.
Okay, but, and you have a 3. Well, what happens to a 2?
You're progressing. So you know, you need support, or you need, you know, you need help to do it, for example.
And the reason I ask this, I'm gonna have to speak to the public and say, look, our minimum standard right now in terms of a grade says 65 or 70. But the minimum standard with the proficiency-based learning is that 3 is tackled a different way, but and then to say a grade. And so if I had to do apples to apples, I'll tell you, well, we're starting out at the bottom. This is the minimum we can expect in terms of somebody out here in terms of a performance in terms of a grade, and we're going to give them whatever they need to move up the level. And so, yes, so a 3 corresponds in my eyes is to the minimum level that you would expect somebody to perform.
Well, that means they're meeting standards.
That's
Correct.
That means
correct.
they're meeting
That's correct.
It means for me to say, and what we've, you know, talked about as a group is, you know, we feel that it's reasonable to say a minimum standard for a middle schooler is you can come in and be a good citizen. You
Right.
can come in and show respect, you can come in and show your best effort, and you can show some responsibility. We're not saying that everyone needs to be able to get a 3 or a 4 in math, because, you know, as you guys said before, like, people are at different levels, and, you know, a lot of students are gonna be progressing and getting the extra help, and they're not gonna be meeting that standard, but we don't wanna penalize those students when they're working hard. So yes, we've said as a school, like, the minimum expectation for habits of work is to meet those standards.
Because
Right.
you don't get an overall, like, this student is a 4 overall. It's broken up into all the different categories, so
Different
it's,
domains, right.
Right, and I just wanted, that's the question that parents keep asking all the time. They used to seeing a number, and I wanted to make sure that we equated that there is a minimum standard. This is supposed to be our minimum standard. The minimum standard under the other system will be a 3. And so, and then we can move on from that point. Sandy?
So listening to the middle school and the high school, and I'll go back to the beginning, Lisa, if you pull down your very first paragraph, it is the policy of. This is where the actual policy to me appears. Everything else seems as though it's administrative regs. That's my point.
Okay, let
And
me,
then that means that they can differentiate between the middle school and the high school.
encourage participation in athletics and the various other activities that are offered at the middle school and high school, which is all great. These activities are organized at any athletic team, club, organization, or groups. We say we don't need to change anything there.
We just need to say the stuff below is administrative regs.
Right, and that's, oh, okay, and you wanted to jump right into administrative
Yes.
grades, so I,
Yes, because it is such a split.
right,
Then
and
it still is a policy
so
for.
use that as the policy.
so,
Okay.
but here's what
My
I
only
don't want
question
to
is in
happen,
that first
see,
paragraph, it makes no mention of eligibility.
Yeah.
Right.
right,
It defines
sentence or
that, it
something.
But that's
defines,
administrative regs.
wait, no, we'll have to put that in our policy. And so,
Right.
and that's why I'm breaking it out. It says we have an intro here, and that needs to be there. Now we can start talking about eligibility at a middle school level and eligibility at a high school level, and give them the right to generate administrative regs at each
Yeah.
one of those.
I
Okay,
appreciate that.
is that,
Leon, the only, I totally agree, I see Sandy's point, and I think that's a good place. You can go to the regs for the individual buildings and where you are. Going back to that first paragraph though, Lisa, if you could. You have 3 sentences, it basically says, your first sentence is, we encourage kids to participate in activities. These activities can include the following things. The last sentence is the one I'm kind of hung up on. For those classes bearing academic credit, school rules apply. I'm not, I would rather have the school board has minimum expectations, or it has expectations for students to participate in these activities. Boom. And then you can go to the regulations and say, oh, if I'm a middle school student, these are my expectations to participate. If I'm a high schooler, boom, this is, but that last sentence doesn't,
Or maybe
I'm
we'll
not sure where
say
that
minimum
goes.
expectations must be met to participate.
Well, that's the one that we wanted to talk about when I said, do we want to do something else out here or not, along that line? I mean, we're saying if I had one of the clubs and it's not equally as one of the other types of sports that are talking, that is,
Yeah.
that's happening, it says, for those classes bearing academic credits, school rules apply. What sports, I mean, your phys ed, that's not,
That's not a.
which ones have academic credit associated with any of those now? Think, none,
No.
none.
We're
But-
talking about the classes, not the sports. So all
Right.
classes,
But that's.
they have to pass it. I mean, there's credit for it.
Right, but they're not related to having to compete in such a way as a team. And I use chess, I can use fencing, I can use other things out here that you do along that line.
They still have to be eligible to play those things.
That's
don't
correct.
They do have to be
Right.
eligible, but they're not academic, the class bearing academic credit, school rules apply. I'm trying to make sure I understand that.
I think that was meant for, they had
I think that's the.
to pass all the classes at 65
But you get
or above
credit?
Okay,
I think we should
And
eliminate
behave.
that.
and behave.
I think
Yes.
that's the
The only one that I can think of is yearbook.
the yearbook,
Yeah, you get credit for yearbook
Yeah,
if
you
you
do.
take the class.
credit for the yearbook.
Okay.
But I think Tim's point was a good one in that, like, if this is the direction the board is looking to go, if we revise that, we could easily revise that sentence, or you guys could easily revise that sentence and say something, you know, that kind of encompasses both buildings, because our building, it wouldn't be academic credits, it would be habits of work, and the high school, if we, you know, went down the road we're going, it would be academic,
Yeah.
so.
See, Leon, I think the thing is, we can't lose sight that we're talking about more than athletics here.
Right,
And so when we look at any of the band, any of the drama courses align with those, that align with those extracurricular activities. So all of that area ties into grades.
so the band gets grades. I mean,
So doesn't
they don't
chorus.
get one for marching, is that correct? Or is that part of,
That's
But
part of their
it's
grade.
all,
Part of their
it's
grade.
all
part of that
everything.
grade? That's the one, thanks for reminding me, that was one I had in there and says, okay, a band member gets a grade. A football player gets no grade, no recognition. That's why I said we need to think about some kind of recognition. And I said, I went out here and somebody else was saying, each quarter, the grades come out, a student had a note on their report card that they participated successfully in Batman or football or basketball. It was, they had a link
Well,
to them.
Can we
I
say
think that's
minimum
for schools that
requirements?
give credit for sports. Sorry, I think
No.
that's for schools that give credit to sports. Like, just for an example, Burton, if you're a varsity letter winner for, say, basketball, you can use that as a phys ed credit at Burton. So I think that's where it shows up on those report cards. But I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, we don't do that here.
We don't do
We don't.
that, and that's why I'm saying, we're gonna think out of the box here. We're gonna change things. This ain't status quo. I'm asking your opinions so that we can go and change whatever is not really working or fitting the need. That's what we're talking about.
So why can't we have something that says minimum requirements must be met to receive academic credit or eligibility?
And then define it in the
And then in the
administrative.
administration, because there is some academic credit, you just said, for some of these things.
I'm gonna put up the actual
Yeah, band
policy
and things
that's
like that, so.
enforced. That was
Yeah.
the one that Chris
Yeah.
had given to, and had worked on.
Right, and so,
So if we're gonna start changing,
Tony, say it again.
let's go with
so
the one we
that
have.
sounds good to
Must
me.
be met to receive academic credit and eligibility. And that'll kind of take care of
Exactly.
all of it, I would think. right?
Yeah. But
Lisa, you got that?
Where's it going?
She's gonna,
Instead of that last sentence.
Here.
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay,
okay.
so that's gonna be gone.
Well, let's strike it and let's hear what,
And then put minimum requirements
Hang on.
must be met in order to receive academic credit and eligibility, or eligibility, I don't know how you want to say it. And eligibility or eligibility. And or do that too.
Participation recognition is what I'm looking for somewhere in here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay.
The part about, see, this is academic credit, but before it said school rules. And the reason for that, if I believe correctly, and anywhere I've ever been, is anything to do with participating in a show, in a play.
Right.
Depends on whether you show up on time for school. Those are school rules.
Right.
That's not academic credit.
So,
So if a student's in a play and they come into school a half a day late,
they
they're
should
not
be,
starring in the play that night.
right.
By 11.
And that's following school rules. That's not academic.
That's
But that
not,
would be eligibility, wouldn't it?
but that's not, yeah, that's,
But then the eligibility has to be tied to school rules.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying don't strike the first sentence, leave it there, but add the second?
I'm just saying there are some things, because again, we're getting lost in the focus that this is all sports, and it's not.
it's not, no.
It's academic eligibility or eligibility for extracurricular activities, sometimes attached to school rules.
So are you okay if that first line was not struck and that it was remained as it was?
I think you have to put something in there about school rules, because if a
Yeah.
student gets suspended by data,
Say yes,
they're
just say
not
yes.
playing football or baseball.
Right, right.
So
And that's
yeah,
school
so leave the
rules.
first one, and then it kind of explains what that means in the second one.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, that's,
Okay.
it's so much we see out here. So I just wanted to make sure, okay, for the classes bearing academic credits, school rules apply. And then minimum requirement must be met in order to receive academic credit, eligibility, or sports recognition. Is that, and when I said sport recognitions or something, what we don't want to do is continue to exclude. Thanks, Tim. Those individuals that participate in some form. Laura, you had mentioned there was an academic requirement coming out somewhere, I think, where things are going to show up on students' report card if they participate. Is that?
So, we were talking about, and actually it's funny.
Yeah.
So, the state of Vermont takes physical education very seriously. So students have a requirement based on standards to participate. And they've also added in the Vermont Educational Quality Standards that students need to have, and we need to be providing opportunities for students to have 30 extra minutes outside of what's required to participate in. It does talk specifically about physical activity, but I think if I were to dig a little bit deeper, going back to Steve's doing a great job of keeping us balanced between sports and co-curricular. But yeah, the Educational Quality Standards is clear that we're supposed to be providing these opportunities.
So, and that's why I said the part about just being able to acknowledge the fact that how they're going to see that somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a place to put that, to say that acknowledgement will be associated with. Is it too early for that?
I think it's too early, and I think I need to go back before and just look at that, and I can bring the
Okay.
more concise language back with me.
Okay.
But I think it's too soon for that piece.
Okay. But I didn't want to. I just wanted to make sure that when we looked at inequities and we started talking about band, we started talking about theater and so forth, and we're saying we're not playing on the same grounds here along that line in terms of recognition. They're getting a grade to participate, and a person that plays baseball gets no grade. You don't have to have one, but you still get some recognition. And the same eligibility. If you show up at the baseball, you don't practice, you don't play. Just like you don't show up for performance practice, you don't perform. So I just want to try to keep things on the same level as much as possible.
Yeah. I do think there's another sort of inequity in play here, and I don't know how to address it. other than to acknowledge it. You know, if a student is on a sports team, she or he has 10, 15, 20 different games that he or she gets the ability, that's the opportunity to play. If that same student is in the drama club, there are 3 nights of performance. And so the idea of missing 1/8 of the performances or games, it affects a student in the drama club much more drastically than it affects a student.
I agree, we hadn't got to that part, that's why I wanted to make sure we take this thing one step at a time and look at the inequities that we have in here and say, let's make sure we understand the consequences for what we have in the policy along that line. But we can, the wording can be stated, but the actual consequences should not be in the policy piece, and that's what somebody was speaking to. We want to get that out, but there should be some consequences of something out here, and somehow we needed to be able to speak to that. So we're going to hold that back here on that line for Laura to come back with the recognitions of students that participate out there in some form or fashion so they can get that. So now we have about 10 minutes more to go in here in this session to move on to how we want to do. Well, now we'll break that out in terms of high school and middle school is what would be happening next
And
in
that's
terms
why-
of a policy.
And if we put it in under the admin regs, then we can
And
separate
then
it out.
then certain things, but we want to speak to what it is that we want for the middle school, and so you, in there right now, we're saying all of these are the things that are both saying high school. So we just copied that all over, and then so let me just take out half of those things or whatever we don't think need to really be there for the middle school, and then we'll go to the high school and we'll start to adjust those, and we'll adjust the middle school ones. And I think that's what happened on the session that you had, but I wanted everybody to see how we needed to break it up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but we could probably use what Chris has already done
For the middle school.
in that other document.
For the middle
Well,
school.
but I think the input was even given for the high school too.
Yeah, both.
It's
Yeah, they're all in
the-
there. They're all in that.
I needed to see how that was. I wasn't
Okay.
privy to all of that before getting here
Hang
to
on.
do that. And so I want to make sure that we agree as to how that needed to be in terms of that. So,
And if you go ahead and read it over, the stuff that Lisa put in that I think is all in the highlighted is exactly what, I described at the beginning for the middle school.
Right,
Later,
okay.
absolutely.
Yes,
because
and
we haven't had a chance to review it, perhaps now is not the time to review it.
well, and that's why I'm saying what we want to do is start breaking the categories out. And then if you're saying this is what I want, we're going to review it. By no means will we be done here today. No way. I wanted to make sure if this is what we were talking about, saying let's take the middle school, and I'm saying, well, where's this part that deals with the high school in there in terms of separating the two? You can expand that a little
Yeah,
bit.
so this is the document that Chris had,
Can you scroll and hit that and it just increase it in a little
Yep.
bit so that I can see what side?
but I can, okay, come on, cursor.
You just push control and then roll your
No, I
mouse
gotta-
and it'll go
My
larger.
mouse was,
Okay, yeah, okay. So now, he's speaking to everything, but I wanted to go back to when he first started to talk about middle school and see what it is. Now, here,
that's middle school.
we're talking about the middle school determined by a student must have at least 3 students and so forth. So okay, so that if we have the same course of a line, I'm saying where's the one now? It talks about the high school.
Are you talking
Okay,
about
right.
changing?
Okay, now we got the saying the high school haven't been adjusted.
No, they have been.
They have been.
They
Okay.
have been. The only thing we're
all.
taking out is a student must have an overall average of 70%, because we really, it doesn't influence anything for us. If we have a kid that's failing, no matter what, they're going to be ineligible, if they fail one class or not. So it's just no point of having the 70% average in there, because we're just going off of either, you know, failing or
You have
not.
to pass everything.
And you have to pass everything, so why does it essentially matter that you have a 70? We haven't had an issue with that since I've been here, so.
So those are the things that I wanted to just say we're gonna strike out along that line in terms of what needs to be the high school, along that line, that's all. So now we got two different sections that talk about one high school, one middle school. Okay?
Yep.
And under those, we can begin to now split the things, and I go back and see the rest of what Chris had in there to talk about things, and wanted to make sure that we didn't have, now this is saying policy, Sandy was talking about putting as many things in administrative regs than to have mental policy, and I agree with that. But what I wanted to do is make sure the policy spoke to those things. We speak to the 3 levels there, and that gives you the right to build an administrative regs behind it. So then the C, teachers will submit reports of students' habits of work. That's an administrative regs. When we start getting in 2 weeks for Friday, you're not going to bring me back here every other month to change the policy. Things that goes into the policy are things that give you the directive to do what you want to do. And then you can change them at will. So we're going to have to move some things along that line. And I wanted to make sure that we gave you the rights to do that, in which you've already, I think A speaks to that enough to say that you can do that in an administrative regs. Is that correct?
I'm
Okay.
gonna move this over. I can't. There's a lot. I can prep that for the
Yeah,
next
but
meeting.
this is
'cause
how
I need to
we're
move all
getting
that
to
stuff.
where, you know, it took a while, but we're getting there to say, okay, the policy is gonna tell you something. It's gonna allow you to do something, but then we have administrators that are responsible for the actual administrating of that and honing in, and you need it to be fair, and that you have somebody to refer back to the policy to say, I have a right to do this a certain way. And that's what we're doing now. So what about the third one, D? Students have an opportunity to be eligible well, that's still an administrative regs too. That's administrative regs. Where else? This is somewhere in the consequences in here, Dave, when you're talking about, we've already mentioned at the top that they have to abide by school
Right.
policies. So this still would be
This would be administrative, because we
Yeah.
our set detention is for attendance, theirs is for discipline, right? Correct, Chris? Yeah.
right. So that'll still be, that'll move on
That would still be part of the regs, yeah.
that'll be regs. Okay.
That's it for us.
Okay, so when you get to B, we're making things pretty simple here. Okay, so you got that one statement, a header that says do something, and then now the rest of it is saying let's do it into the regs.
So pretty much the policy will be just 2 lines.
Well,
One for the middle school, one for the high
It's just
school,
like
No.
attendance, basically, yeah.
and then everything else would go into the regs.
Right.
Right. That's what it's looking like right now. And so what we want, I mentioned, you don't want to have an administrative nightmare in terms of having to do something and have parents and everybody else all over you, when you can make things as simple and equitable as possible. But you have that right as administrators. So as a policy committee, we want to get all the boards to agree to give you that, and then have you deal with it and make adjustments as necessary. Okay? And so the thing that, for high school, and I don't know that you wanna even tackle that right now.
I think it's all set, right?
It's all, yeah, the
Yeah.
high
It's all
school's all set. The only thing
So
we're
same
taking out
thing.
is the 70.
Yeah.
And then the 1/8
this.
part, because we're gonna go with the, like we talked about, the 1 week, because like for hoops in seasons that are longer, 1/8 is usually, it's gonna, you know, it's not gonna be much, so we just do we're just gonna stick with the consistency of the 1 week, boom.
So we'll come back and look at that, but then you're saying a C, the rest of that on down, or
Yep,
we're gonna
everything's
go
all
for
good.
go for administrative regs as opposed to
Yep,
Right.
all those are, yep.
policy. And so that's what will be happening out there along that line. And that's what we want to make sure we do. And then we can come back. I know administrative regs, I mean, for the most part, we want that to be handled by the administrators and so forth along that line. I just want to make sure that our policy give you what you need to be able to do what you need to do in that area along that line. And that's one of the things that we're going to come back with and talk about is how you get recognition for the students along that line. If they get taking the class, taking a playing and doing something, that's fine. And the rest of it, we'll be able to move on and say that this is administrative rig, and then you can change it. That's a lot a lot of discussion. I think that this will still be on our top burner for next month. And so May 6th is when we said we're going to meet again, and at that time we'll have the policy piece out, and the administrative regs can be separated out on the bottom of that, and we'll take a look and see whether we have anything else that we're missing in terms of a policy, and then be ready to move that on along that line.
I'll do a mock-up with all the strike-throughs and stuff, because it's gonna end up looking like a big mess by the time I move everything. But then I'll also do a mock-up of what it will look like
Thanks.
clean when everything's said and done.
Okay, so I just want to thank everybody for the patience and the time spent here tonight, and I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to think outside the normal realms of things, or how we wanted to do in terms of our population and the student. So you may go back in terms of things in the office and say, well, I think we want to do something a little different. You still have that right in terms of administrative regs. So, if anybody else has anything else you want to say? Well, thank you, and we'll start with, track and sheet. We'll just pick up right here for next time, and
Thank you, Lynn.
we'll move on.
Sounds good.
Thank you.